Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 702 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our ninth book just came out. It's called From Letters to Leaders, The Legacy of Service. So I want you to go and pick up that book on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, if you've never read the book by Viktor Frankl, it's called Man's Search for Meaning. You should run out to the library right now. Just put pause on this interview, go to the library and read it. It is one of my favorite books of all time. It talks about Frankl's personal story as a prisoner in concentration camps like Auschwitz in World War II. And he explains how inner freedom helped people to survive extreme hardship and that human life has purpose. He believed that finding meaning is our main drive as human beings. Just as incredible that this best-selling book has survived the test of time all the way since 1946, and it's still a timeless classic book. So here to talk more about this book is our next guest. Salvatore Tagliareni is an internationally respected speaker whose life and work are deeply influenced by Viktor Frankl, the distinguished psychiatrist, Holocaust survivor, and founder of legotherapy. Frankl developed legotherapy. It's a meaning-centered approach that helps people find purpose, even in life's most painful circumstances. And its core belief is this: we can't always choose what happens to us, but we can choose our attitude and our response. And in that choice, we discover meaning. Through his rare mentorship with Frankl, Salvatore carries forward this timeless wisdom for leaders, teams, and individuals facing uncertainty, loss, and change. A former Catholic priest and executive leadership consultant, Sal is the author of 9 books as well, including the best-selling book, Roving Leadership. Welcome to the show, Sal.
Great to be here, Mike.
It is fantastic to have you on the show and to talk about Viktor Frankl a little bit. I think it's important to keep that memory alive for especially some of our younger students who are in college now. I think it's more important than ever that we talk about things like World War II and some of the things that happened there. And, you know, you've had a very unusual journey. I mean, you've been a Catholic priest, you've been a professor, an organizational consultant, a business coach, author, leadership expert. That's a lot of different titles there. So, how did all of these different chapters of your life shape the person you are today?
I think in every aspect of my life, there's been a period of learning. I come out of an immigrant family. My parents were both Italian immigrants, grew up in the city, learned a lot of things about life in Jersey City, New Jersey. And I have an insatiable curiosity about life. And so one of the real turning points in my life, though, was my best friend was killed in an automobile accident. He was 29. And I was so incredibly sad at the time. I had read Man's Search for Meaning. And so I get on the phone and I thought I would get 28 secretaries. And I said, I'm looking for Dr. Frankl, but I speak fluent Italian and English. My German's not so hot. And he said, well, that's not a problem. This is Dr. Frankl. I said, oh my God, what do I do now? So I said, I blurted out, I would like to study with you. He said, where are you? I said, I'm in Rome. He said, come and stay with me. Come and stay with me, this fabulous giant. And that was the beginning. He was incredible. I mean, he just literally, he never denied my grief, but he said, do something with it. He says, serve others for the rest of your life. So it's incredibly profound. His influence is continuing, by the way. I've probably given 500 talks, and every time someone comes up and says, Viktor Frankl changed my life.
Wow. That's an incredible story. I mean, to have a conversation with him, let alone live in his house. I mean, that's just outrageous. It's amazing that you had that opportunity. I'm certainly very jealous that you had that opportunity. It's just incredible. And obviously, I think one of the most remarkable parts of your story is that relationship that you had with Victor. So, talk to us a little bit about ultimately what led you to pick up the phone and to call him in Vienna, and talk about, that relationship a little bit more.
Yeah, it was really an impulse. Honestly, Mike, I never thought I would meet him. When interestingly enough, he did not see himself as a celebrity. He had an incredible antenna for people in pain. He treated me as if I was equal. I'll give you a great story. He took me with him to San Diego at one point, and we went out with Viktor Frankl, Paul Rogers, Harold Greenwald, Everett Surstrom, and me, the kid from Jersey City, okay? And after dinner, we were walking in the parking lot, and Victor turned to me and said, "Why were you so quiet tonight?" I said, "Victor, give me a break, all these giants." He put his hands on my shoulder and he looked into my eyes and he said, "You are as bright as everyone in that room, and you have value because of who you are, Salvatore. Never forget that." Wow. And that's the way he treated people.
Wow, that is absolutely incredible. Yeah, to hear that from Viktor Frankl, I'm sure that completely changed the direction of your life, right? I mean, now you suddenly start believing that you are just as good as anybody else, that you have a ton to contribute. And now suddenly you believe that you can do it, whatever it is that you're going to
Yeah.
do with your life. Is that kind of how it felt?
Yeah, the other thing is a lot of people don't realize he was also a neurologist. He's the one that turned me on to the whole concept of rewiring the brain. The big issue today is that a lot of what we've learned about the brain in the past is not true. You can rewire anyone's brain at any age. And knowing that was incredible for me because a lot of times when I work with people, the real issue is identity. If you don't understand that you truly are unique and have a sense of worthiness, period, you are vulnerable to all the stuff that happened before, much of which you will never understand. And what Victor taught me was one of the ways to meaning is to address key issues in a person's life surrounding identity. You can't change anything in life if you don't believe that you deserve it. And so that's really where I focus with people. The first thing I say to them is, let's not look for villains, but the first decision you made about your life, you didn't make. It was made by your parents, your siblings, your culture. At this stage of your life, what decision do you want to make about who you are? The second thing I try to come back with is there's a big difference between self-esteem and worthiness. Self-esteem goes up and down. You are worthy, period. And if you believe that you deserve to be loved, understood, and valued, what would you start doing today, Mike? And what would you stop doing today? And that starts to lead towards behavior. Insight's great, but without behavior, it never works.
Just incredible stuff. I really appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. I think all of us need somebody that believes in us. And I think that's an important lesson for the people who are listening here today. Let the people know in your life that you believe in them and you see them in a certain light, and they will reach that. Because of your belief in them. So I think that's really, really important. And Frankl taught you about the power of choice, I think is another interesting
Yeah.
piece, even when we can't choose our circumstances. So what does that idea mean for a college student who today is listening, but they feel trapped by failure in their life, rejection, grief? Their family expectations is huge for college students, or even just uncertainty about the future with AI and everything else that's going on.
Right. That's a great question. I think there are three paths for everybody, especially college students. One is we have to start to look at our thoughts. Everybody has thousands of thoughts. The first question when you look at a thought is it true? And is it helpful? Because a lot of times people have the thought, I'm really not enough. I'm not bright. I'm not as good as my brother or sister. I didn't go to the right school. So one of the things we have to do is we have to start to look at thoughts and help people reframe the thoughts. The second thing is everybody carries unexamined beliefs. All right. They are the foundation. What you think and what you believe also leads to what you choose. And the third access path, everybody's got a critical voice in their heads. Mine is gloom and doom Sal. No matter what, gloom and doom Sal has permanent resonance in my head. The difference now, Mike, is he doesn't make decisions anymore because a lot of what he tells me is at the subconscious level. I have no control over that. And so Victor would say, no matter what your circumstances are, you always have a choice. And I'll point that towards me personally. When I was in the middle of my grief, he looked at me and he said, look, you have a choice. You can get in the grave emotionally with your friend, or you can choose to use that pain and serve others. There is always a choice. People say, I have no choice. You always have a choice. Here was a guy who was in 4 concentration camps, lost his mother, his father, his wife, his brother, his occupation, his country, and yet he found meaning in life. I mean, my life pales compared to that. And so many of us have circumstances that we didn't choose. To a lot of people, there are kids right now who are listening to this who don't think they are enough. Regardless of the circumstances, they don't feel like they're enough. They don't believe they are enough. They have a choice today, regardless of their circumstances, to start to believe in who they are. And you pointed on something. One of the joys of my life, I get the ability to spend time with people to encourage them, to see who they really are. And a lot of times I see above who they think they are. They're a lot better than they think they are. And every person listening to this has value and deserves to be understood and loved and trusted.
That's a great message. I really like that a lot. So thank you for sharing that. There's another great book out there called Servant Leadership, written by Robert Greenleaf. And
Yeah.
you've adopted this idea that leadership is actually service rather than power. What changes when somebody stops asking the question, how do I become the person in charge here? And starts asking, how can I be useful to the people around me?
Mike, that's a great question. I think we have to get back to the idea. Much of what we learned about leadership is false. We learned that leadership is dependent on title, initials after your name, where you are in an organization. Leadership is roving. It moves from person to person dependent on the need and the skills. I'll give you a perfect example. I worked for a pharmaceutical company as a consultant, and one of the issues they had was their pills were breaking down. And so they said, well, okay, let's call a company of engineers and they will come in and fix it. And I raised my hand and I said, what about the operators on the machines? Why in heaven's name would we want those guys? Most of them are high school graduates. I said, well, they spend 20 years working on these machines. Okay, let's keep Sal happy. Assign I'm one of the operators to the engineers. The first day, the engineer said to the person, is there anything you can tell me about this machine? Not really. The only thing that I have to tell you, sir, is that I've never seen this little valve sweat before. And the engineer said it would have taken me 2 weeks to find that. He didn't know how to fix it. I knew how to fix it. The same thing is, no matter who you are, leadership doesn't depend on personality. You don't have to be verbal. You don't have to be, in a position. Everybody out there today is capable of leadership. And leadership is based on need and skills. And if you watch, even at a meeting, Mildred comes in and she starts the meeting. She's the leader. All of a sudden, Mike has a skill that they're talking about. Mike becomes the leader. Then it's Sal. Then it's Frank. And once people understand that, leadership isn't just writing a great American novel or curing cancer. Every one of you today has the opportunity to be a leader. You can be a leader by kindness. You can be a leader by sending an email to a friend. You can be a leader by listening. You can be a leader by data, by experience. There's a million ways to be a leader. And in my book, Roving Leadership, one of the things I tried to do is dispel the myths. There's a ton of myths in the way, Mike. And one by one, as they shatter, people have a sense of their own value.
Let's drill down on that a little bit more because you're certainly the expert when it comes to roving leadership. When I work with fraternity and sorority members, I think they sometimes make this mistake that only the president, the chapter officers, or even committee
Right.
chairs are the leaders. When I ask a crowd of 4,000 college students who here, is a leader, only somebody who has an actual title raises
Right.
their hand, and the rest of them, just sit on their hands. So, what would roving leadership actually look like inside fraternity or sorority chapter or student organization where, let's say, 100 members all have different talents?
I think the way you get at that is, first of all, start with the idea of who in the group is the leader. And only 8 hands go up. And I say, okay, the other 92, please raise your hand because you will never be a leader if you don't decide to be a leader. So I'm going to start with the premise that the 100 of you are leaders. Now let's go to a specific example. You're working on a plan for your sorority or whatever it is. The president gets up. The president's bright. She's wonderful. She's accomplished, but she's limited because she only has a certain amount of skills. So when we get to a new point in the process, in the plan, is she the best person to do that? Maybe it's Mike, maybe it's Mildred, maybe it's Harry. And if we don't start with the idea that myths get in the way, for example, I hear this all the time. Mike is a born leader. Well, then Jane next to Mike thinks I'm not a leader. Well, you have to get rid of that. You have to get rid of the myth that you have to be a certain age to be a leader, or a certain ethnic group, or a certain racial group. You have to have initials after your name. Every one of you listening today has the opportunity to be a leader based on the circumstances and the skills needed. When I work with teams, by the way, one of the questions I ask is, okay, this is your issue. Who in this room is the best qualified person to deal with that? I don't go to title. I don't go to discipline. I go to who is the best person in this room to deal with that. And a lot of times, by the way, it's not the most verbal people. It's the person who's reflecting there, who has done something and says, I think if we did this, it might be helpful. So again, it's the concept of leadership being universal rather than singular. Because we still get, I mean, I go to meetings all the time and they wait for the president to decide, what truth is. The problem with that is the president many times is so far removed from the actual set of circumstances. The person closest to the issue is more qualified than the president. But we all bow down to authority. We bow down to titles. We bow down to positions. And I think a lot of kids don't feel like they are leaders because they don't believe they are enough. And I feel just the opposite. Every kid I work with has the capability of being a leader. Not on every issue, not in every experience, but in specific needs. The kid who sits there and says nothing might be the brightest kid in the room with regard to this particular issue. We need to reinforce that. We need to find ways that people who are not verbal realize they need to contribute.
Yep, I think that's another important lesson for our leaders today to make sure they listen and hear from some of those people that might not be as verbal, but have a lot to contribute to the conversation. The other thing I want to talk to you about is failures because I've made a million mistakes in my life and certainly have had some failures, but it seems like, today's generation, they're afraid to fail. And so you argue that past failures don't disqualify us from leadership. So, how can a young person who's listening right now learn from a bad decision they made without allowing that decision to become their entire identity?
I think you start with the idea. It really troubles me when somebody says, I am a failure. Not true. Okay. You and I have failed at, a lot of things. Okay. My belief is failure is feedback. Failure is an opportunity to look at and say, What happened there? Why did I do that? See, every failure has a reason. You made the decision based on data, and maybe it wasn't good data, but you made it, okay? What did I learn from that? Because that's the value of failure. Why would I not do that again? What was it in my belief about myself that allowed me to do that? Rather than beating yourself up. See, this is the distinction again between self-esteem and worthiness. Self-esteem says, Mike, you failed. Nah, you're always failing at that. It's probably going to happen again. Be careful. Don't take any risks. Worthiness says, Mike, your worth as an individual person hasn't changed because you failed. Now, the thing, Mike, though, is you need to look at that and say, do you want to do that again? What did you learn from that? Okay. What price do you feel you have to continue to pay for that failure? Maybe it's an apology. Failure should not be a definition. It should be a temporary place where we look at why did we do that? Will we do it again? Did it have any value? What did I learn? And the key issue is, what did I learn from that? One of the things that I've learned a lot from my failures is that it's okay. I'm a risk taker. And every time I failed and I sat down and I looked at it, I learned something, Mike. And I'll tell you, I don't make those mistakes again. And if you start with the idea, this is a key issue. Nobody is perfect. Don't expect yourself to be perfect. And if somebody is laying on you the need to be perfect, reject it. You can't be perfect. You can be excellent. You can be great, but you can't be perfect. And so failure should not be the thing that says, Sal, don't ever try anything again because you failed. I am not a failure, and neither are you. We've all failed. And if you haven't failed, you'll probably be living in your living room, sitting on the sofa, thinking about nothing. Everybody fails.
Yeah, I've certainly accepted that. I'm also a risk taker, and I keep trying. And you learn each time out when it doesn't work. But when it does work, boy, oh boy, is that fulfilling. So yeah, go out there and keep trying. And failure's okay, especially in college. I feel like the stakes are very low in college. You're not betting your entire life future, your home, your family. I mean, there's very low stakes in college. So this is the time to try different things, right? Mm.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we have this idea that you're fixed at a certain point. I always use the analogy. We go to college, we finish college, and then there's no coaching that goes on for the rest of our lives. The greatest athletes in the world have coaches, okay? Because progression and growth are constant, but they always get back to identity. If you don't believe that you are a person that has value, you're not going to grow. In spite of your failures, in spite of all of the things that you can't do, think about who you are. I love this analogy. Viktor Frankl said to me one time, if you went into an antique store and this guy said to you, see this piece over here? There's only one of those in the entire world. He said, you would probably go, wow. Mike, there have been billions of people that have lived before you. There's never going to be another Mike.
That's
Nobody sees the world exactly like you. Nobody has the opportunities of kindness exactly like you. Nobody can change the world exactly like you. And so we worship these pieces of art and we miss the value of that kid next to you is the most valuable one of a kind in the world. That's not an exaggeration. That's valuable. And yet we wind up, I was 384th in a class of 392. That's not who you are. That's a number. Okay. I didn't go to Harvard. I went to Twiddly Dunk University. So what? Every university has knowledge. Okay. So a lot of times our definitions of ourselves are really plastic. They're not real. They're synthetic, but they govern who we are. And it gets back to What Victor would say, if you want to find meaning, you have to believe in who you are. If you want to find meaning, regardless of no matter what your circumstances are in college right now, there are positive choices for you to make about yourself because you deserve to be loved, understood, and valued, period. I'm talking about how you feel. I'm talking about who you are.
You know, you've written 9 books. One of them is The Unseen Pain. And in there, you write about people feeling as though they have to earn acceptance by being successful, by being helpful, by always getting things right. So, you know, if what you said is true, right, that we're all unique, that we're all special, that we all deserve to be loved, et cetera, where does that feeling of I'm not enough come from?
I think it comes from a lot of things that you will never truly understand. For example, I talked to a kid recently who thought that his life was because that the reason his parents got divorced, because his mother said to him after the breakup, you know, your father was really unhappy because of your behavior. All of a sudden, this kid took on the guilt of a relationship that he could never fully understand. There are messages in life, and again, I'm not talking about villains. Every human being gets messages in life. And by the time you are 21, you have made a decision about who you are, not based solely on yourself, but based on external messages. Okay. What you need to do at that time is to say, okay, who is the person I choose to be now? Who do I really want to be? And then you start to see it in the sense of becoming. You don't want to give a kid a pie in the sky recipe that says, okay, you're miserable today. In 1 hour, I'm going to make you perfect. But what you can say is you are sensing and becoming the kind of person you were always meant to be. I can't get into the 10,000 messages in your subconscious, but what I can start to do is help you rewire your brain by saying, I deserve to be because I am a somebody. I am enough. I will become more than enough. The more you feed that foundation, because insight's not enough, you have to behave. And small acts of behavior help rewire the brain into new habits. A lot of your habits are at the subconscious level,
Mhm.
and you trying to change those are not as easy as creating new ones. It takes 30 days of persistent behavior to rewire your brain. The more you do that, it's just simple things by saying, I am enough. If I'm enough, what am I going to do today to prove that I am enough to myself? Every small action, Michael, helps.
Very helpful. I really appreciate that. I have to ask you this question because at this stage of your life, with everything that you've experienced, everyone you've learned from, like Victor himself personally, what gives your own life meaning today?
My own life really focuses around sharing, not only with Victor, by the way, I had the privilege of also studying with Aaron Tim Beck. Okay. Um, I have a ton of experience that comes from my mentors and my life experience and my family. I feel like I stand on the shoulders of giants.
Mhm.
And what gives me meaning is sharing this stuff with other people. I think the greatest joy in my life is watching somebody grow. I mean, when I see a kid who's in the doldrums and somehow has a sense of, wow, I really have some value. Mike, there's no feeling in the world like that. So it's endless for me because there's just opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And so again, and much of it is small. It's through acts of kindness, encouraging others to feel that they deserve to be loved, understood, and valued is one of the greatest gifts that I've been given.
That's fantastic. And we agree. We both stand on the shoulders of giants, but yeah, Victor is he's on the Mount Rushmore of giants. So,
Yeah.
so read his book and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But good for you, and it's been great to talk to you and meet you and learn more about your experiences with Victor and what motivates you going forward. I think all of those lessons are incredibly important for college students to hear. And some of them may be learning about Victor's work for the first first time today. So I think you've done a great service here on our show today. So if our listeners, if they want to connect with you and buy your book, it's called Roving Leadership. Where should they go in order to buy the book and connect with you?
The easiest is sjtagliarenibooks.com. If you go on Amazon, they have all my books.
Excellent.
But this has been a joy talking with you, Mike, really.
Hey, it's my pleasure to bring your work to college students, and we'll keep that cycle going so that way more are going to learn about your book, Roving Leadership. Victor's book as well, I think is absolutely a classic. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. If you read these two books, just read two books, okay? It's Man's Search for Meaning and Roving Leadership. I tell you what, you are going to be ahead of the game. So go and pick up those books today. Sal, thank you so much for being here today. Really,
Thank you. It's a privilege.
yeah.
Bye-bye, Mike.
Of course. And to our listeners, if you learned something today from Sal, and I know that you did because I learned 10 things, please share this episode with your chapter. I want you to drop it in a group chat or share it on social media with your entire chapter. You never know who needs to hear Sal's message today. Thank you so much to our listeners. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.